event. Okay. Okay, everybody. So a few people here on Twitch have asked me what I thought about the most recent controversy to come out of the poker world right now, which is the controversy surrounding Mike Leah's win at this most recent WPT Fallsview event. I want to start the video by saying that I've had a lot of respect for Mike. I continue to have a lot of respect for Mike Leah. Go Leafs, go! I've played with him quite a bit during the WSOPs over the past few years. Played with him along on the trail. He is truly a grinder's grinder. He's a pro's pro, you know, and he has always been very positive at the table. He's somebody that I look up to as another poker player to aspire to be like. He puts in his work ethic is unmatched, and I feel like I can safely say he has had the respect and admiration of the majority of the poker community. There have been some personal conflicts in the past that I've personally found amusing, such as his conflict with Jordan Christos about sanitation during a WPT 5-diamond event at the Bellagio a few years back. But other than that, he's pretty well liked among the community and is a pretty good ambassador to the game. That being said, what has happened in poker this week has kind of discouraged me a little bit and made me realize that who are our heroes in poker? They're just people like you and me. If you don't know what we're talking about here, what's going on with Mike Leah? Mike Leah just won a WPT championship. He just won a WPT event. This, along with his WSOP bracelet that he won, puts him in a very small category of poker players. And let me go ahead and take a look at who we're talking about here. Mike Leah, Hinden Mob. I'm not sure if this is his first WPT. It may well be. I think he might have more than 10 million in tournament earnings. He's been 7 million. Let me go ahead and show you his Hinden Mob here. So here we've got Mike Leah, go Leafs go, $7 million in tournament earnings. A long, long history of first place finishes. I mean, just look at that. When you compare the first places to second places, I mean, you see this guy's just a crusher. When he gets there, he brings it. And when we take a look at the first place finishes that he's got, let's see, some of his notable wins. Here's the Brigada Deep Stack Poker main event back in 2009. Here's a Deep Stack at Venetian 2009. Here's a PCA prelim in 2014. Here we have a WSOP bracelet event in Australia, the 25K No Limit Hold'em High Roller. This is really when that's the event where he got that crowning achievement in poker, actually winning a WSOP bracelet. Here he took down another PCA prelim in 2016. Here's a WPT prelim. That's not a main event, it's just a prelim. So it doesn't count as a WPT bracelet. Here's a circuit ring. Look at that, a $365 prelim. I mean, this guy is a grinder's grinder. Here's another circuit ring. And then you've got a couple of other six-figure scores here. 2017 Fallsview Poker Classic. I'm pretty sure that is just a prelim. But still a six-figure score. We've got this main event right here is the one that we're talking about. Right? This is the one that just happened. So he hasn't actually won a WPT before. I think he's gotten pretty close in a few WPT main events, but this is the one that has everybody talking. Mike Leah winning a $358,000 prize, and second place Ryan Yu. But it turns out that this wasn't an outright win. Instead, what happened was when it got heads up, the two players made an ICM chop deal. When it got heads up, though, Ryan Yu had Mike Leah covered 2-1. Mike only had a third of the chips. Ryan had him covered, well covered. So when they took an unscheduled break, and they went away from the table to work out the details of an ICM chop. Now, this is actually against the rules in the WPT. It's against the rules in the WSOP. There's a lot of tours that specifically say players are not to make deals, and the WPT it follows that line. That didn't let Mike and Ryan that didn't keep Mike and Ryan from making a deal. And from pretty much everybody's account, they stepped away from the table. They made this ICM deal. But then what is even more controversial than that, that happens all the time, you guys. Deals happen at final tables all the time. I can say that for me personally, at the World Series of Poker, I've never made a deal at the final table. I've never been in a situation where I've been playing for a bracelet, never felt like, maybe we should make a deal here. I've had people talk to me about making deals at WSOPs, but I've always said, no, I don't make deals. So it's never been an issue for me personally. And I'm pretty much of the opinion that deals are bad for poker. Deals are bad for tournament poker, for a lot of different reasons. And I'll talk about those here in a second. But let's just look at this particular instance of Mike and Ryan leaving the table, going to make their little ICM deal, and then they come back and shenanigans happen. Ryan ends up playing this really, really big pot with Mike, where he basically dumps his chips to Mike. He makes a big bet, and then makes another big bet or whatever. We can look at the actual hand history, but I don't think it really matters. The point is that they made a deal. They came back. Ryan dumped his chips to Mike. Mike ends up being the winner of the tournament, even though, from what it looks like, Ryan was actually the one who took the bulk of the prize pool and should be listed as the winner. But in order for Mike to make the deal, he wanted to also have the Player of the Year points. He also wanted to have the Hendon Mob results, and he wanted to have the entry into the WPT Championship tournament that they allow all the WPT winners to go play, and the prestige that comes with having a WSOP bracelet and a WPT bracelet, because that club is very small. Yeah, this is wrong on a lot of different levels. I first heard about it when somebody here on Twitch was asking what I thought about the controversy surrounding Mike Leah's heads-up deal. I didn't know that they had made a deal, but it certainly seems like they did. Dan O'Brien was one of the first pros that I saw on Twitter start really attacking Mike over this. My goal in making this video is not to attack Mike. I like Mike Leah, and I think that he's good for the game. And I don't think that when he was in the position that he was in, that he felt like he was doing anything wrong. I think that after some reflection, he might decide that he was wrong. Let's take a look. It looks like Mike just announced, just released a statement about 20 minutes ago. So I'm going to read this statement out loud. And then I haven't read this first, so you're going to be seeing my reaction as I have it. Let me go ahead and load it up here on screen. So here it is. Fallsview WPT. We released it on Facebook 20 minutes ago. Well, it's been an interesting day to say the least. Can't say I've ever experienced anything like this before. I have no issue whatsoever with people debating Player of the Year, TOC, deal-making ethics, WPT rules, and whatever else they so choose. The one thing that stings is the words, buy a trophy, title, or something to that effect. I have never or will ever pay for a win, but I'll get into more detail about that later. Not sure why I feel the need to defend myself, but I feel my integrity is being attacked, which doesn't feel very good. Okay. You know what? I'm not going to stop, okay? I'm going to just keep on reading the statement, and then I'm going to go back and we'll start breaking it down. I'm extremely sleep deprived, and it's been about 10 years since I've had to form paragraphs, so excuse my ramblings and grammatical errors. I'm going to focus mainly on my heads-up deal at Fallsview WPT main event, as that's what has obviously brought these issues into attack or discussion. I will post a follow-up going back on my previous wins, chops, non-chops, as not only does it seem many are curious, I too would like to review to see how I've made out over the years. A quick background, my first 6 or 7 years playing poker, I was in and out of some sort of backing deal, so my deal-making decisions weren't always 100% my own. I've been playing exclusively on my own for about 3.5 years with no backing whatsoever since my $1 million score in 2014, which I had sold off a good portion of my action. I did not chop heads up with Dan Coleman, even though we were playing for about $400,000. He hinted he would want more than ICM, and my pride wasn't okay with that, so we played for it all, and he won. I almost never sell action with the odd exception like the 50K PPC at WSOP, and just about never swap any percentages. I like to play for as much as possible. I enjoy the competition and like all the pressure being on myself. With that said, how do I feel about chopping? I don't like it. Being deep in a tournament, making the final table, playing shorthanded with huge money on the line, playing heads up for a title, there is no feeling I can compare it to, nothing I love more. I've turned down more chops than most people, that I am sure. So why did I decide to chop this tournament, and how did we go about it? I wanted to win this tournament more than any other I can remember. I was messaging a friend early day 2 when I had 20 big blinds, making plans for them to come back and watch the final table. I told them I was going to make it and win. This is not a normal occurrence for me. From 3 tables to 2 tables to the final table, I was focused on nothing else. The word chop or deal was never brought up by myself or anyone else. And the way the chip distribution was, often myself with one of the bigger stacks and various short stacks, I wouldn't have even considered a deal, as ICM gives more value to shorter stacks than I would ever want to give them in a deal. After many up and downs, I found myself heads up with Ryan. We're Facebook friends, friendly with each other, have a lot of friends in common, both big Toronto sports fans, and we've ended up playing against each other quite a bit over the last couple of years. I respect his game and genuinely like him, but don't know him very well personally. As soon as we were heads up, he mentioned something about talking deal. Can't remember his exact words. I hadn't considered making a deal until that exact moment. I believe my words were something like, well, I wouldn't consider any deal unless I got the win, trophy, etc. I didn't know how Ryan would respond, and honestly didn't care. I would have been happy to play for it. Heads up for a WPT title. Not much more exciting than that. But very quickly he responded that he'd be fine with that if we did even ICM. Okay, so we're going to do an even ICM deal. Sure, I may be giving up some edge, but it's not like I play heads-up poker every day, week, or even month. Wow, I actually get to be responsible and not just flip for $150,000, and I get a WPT title, a spot in the Champions Club, entry into the TOC, and my 4th Fallsview title in 5 years. How could I not agree to this? Ryan and I went off the stage to discuss. They did not pause the clock, but we didn't mind, as it seemed very likely we would come to an easy agreement of terms. We worked out all the exact details and breakdown. We added the 15K seat to first for the ICM breakdown, worked how much I would have to give him, as I would have to sign for, get paid for first, and then give him the difference. We even agreed how much we were going to tip to the dealers and staff. We triple-checked stacks, payouts, and everything. They said we were going to have to play it out. Ryan and I figured the easiest and quickest way to get it over was just for him to raise fold large portions of his stack. We did this in an extremely obvious way, making a lot of jokes and having fun. We were both extremely happy with the outcome. Now looking back, I see how it's embarrassing and disappointing for the WPT, reporting staff, and even poker players and fans having ridiculous hand histories like that being posted on their website live updates and deciding the tournament that way. There has to be a better way to go about it. We were not trying to disrespect any parties involved, but we were celebrating our wins and made a decision in our own best interests. We've both earned almost $1 million at Fallsview over the last few years. Incredible, really. One comment I read a few times is, quote, they shouldn't have made it so obvious, end quote. In my mind, that would be 1,000% times worse. If we schemed up a way for him to dump chips to me without anyone knowing, that would feel like cheating collusion and would be embarrassing for Ryan, having to have lose heads up. The way we did it, we were both winners, and we were being as forthcoming as we could. There have been countless suggestions on how this can be improved in the future, and I'm quite confident that from this there will be more discussion amongst the tours and hopefully improvement in the entire system. I do agree that every major title should be played for, and if that was the case, then we would have played. People suggesting why didn't we chop and leave something to play for, or chop and play for the trophy TOC. Those would not have been my terms. Chop fairly and give me the win, or we play. The fact that my opponent chooses to give me the win to lock up their equity is their choice. My reputation, my play at the table, my intimidation, my likability, whatever else that goes into their decision to give me more money or to give me the trophy, that's something that I have earned over time. Ryan also had his own motivations, some of which he has shared on Twitter, at I Need Sheet. I won't speak for him, but he seemed more than content and knowledgeable regarding the TOC, and that he had put some thought into making a deal. WT Player of the Year. What should be done in deals? Splits points amongst the chopping players, whether even or by ICM. Sure, this makes sense, but WPT doesn't facilitate deals, so they can't chop Player of the Year points either. Should I get somewhere between first and second Player of the Year points? Yes, but what about all the other deals that have happened already this year, past years, and will continue to happen going forward? Penalize me because we didn't try as hard to hide it? Either way, Ryan and I received the same total amount of points, and it's not like either of us are in the running for Player of the Year. I have one previous small cash this season. Maybe he even had more. I'm not really sure, but other than a contending player trying to buy points late in the season, this is probably the least important part of the debate. TOC. Again, like the points, one of us was going to win a TOC entry for this year and the buy-in option for future years. It's not like we found a way to sneak an extra player in or something. He opted for the cash now while I get the shot to try and win more or lose a 15K value in the TOC. Did I earn my way into the club? Is the TOC diminished because we made a deal with 2 players left that decided who gets in? I think this has been overblown. Sure, in a perfect world, we want every player in the TOC to win an event outright, but that's not a reality. Who knows how many winners this season and past seasons have made a deal to decide who wins? More than me, that is 100% for sure. It's not like I'm a billionaire who bought his way into an exclusive club. I had to fight my way through a field of 517 players to the final 2, and earned enough respect from my opponent for them to make a deal that gives me the win and everything that goes with it without me giving any extra money. Now, I would feel somewhat differently if someone was to actually buy the win. If I had offered an extra 2K, 10K, 50K, 100K, where the line is, I'm not so sure. Is it negotiating? Is it buying? But that scenario does not and will never involve me. Too much pride. All of my online titles, 4 F-tops, 2 W coops, 2 scoops, 1 T coop, 1 UBOC, LOL. All 5 of my WSOP circuit rings, my WSOP bracelet, all won without a deal. Some other wins were chopped. Some of my losses were also chopped over the years. If you want to pretend my results over the years are tarnished because I made a deal heads up, okay, you're free to your opinion. You have to get there before you can even consider making a deal, and I got there more than you. I've had numerous requests to do a podcast or interview to discuss the situation, so we'll likely follow up with that in the coming days if anyone still cares. Happy Valentine's Day, Mike. All right, Mike. Let's go through it. Let's start breaking it down. First, I want to take a look at the chat and see if anybody has any quick thoughts here. Ghost of M says the takeaway that has been mentioned the least is that gaming commissions and casinos should facilitate deals to make backroom dealings like this less necessary. I'm gonna have to disagree with you on that one, Ghost of M. So this is how I see it. First off, I'm pretty sure that this is actually against the rules in the WPT. If you look at the WPT terms and conditions, that they release, that you sign a release when you're going through, and by playing the tournament you're agreeing to these rules. I'm pretty sure that the WPT refuses to facilitate deals because tournament deals are actually against the rules of the WPT. So once they got heads up and Mike and Ryan make a deal, they're actually breaking the rules of the tournament. And those rules are set up for the good of the game. Why is it important that deals don't happen in tournaments? Well, for a number of reasons. First off, a tournament like the WPT especially, these are televised events. These are events that we're trying to get poker to have kind of this public perception of a sport. We're trying to make it seem like we're athletes and that we're competing at this high level, deals kind of break that illusion. I mean, could you imagine watching the Super Bowl and the Patriots come out and the Eagles come out, and then Doug and Bill go into the corner and they come out, they shake hands, and then the kickoff happens, and it's just safety touchdown, over and over, and all of a sudden, the Patriots end up, winning 70 to nothing, and all the players are all smiles, and everyone's like, well, wait a minute, what just happened? Oh, they made a deal. That's not how other sports work, and that's not how poker should work as a sport. There's a difference between cash games and tournaments, and when you're at a tournament, especially a televised tournament like the WPT, where you're presenting something to the public, and you're trying to create this this message that poker is a game and a sport that deserves your attention, deserves to be watched. Deal making kind of makes a mockery of that. What else? Deal making is bad for the game because when you're actually at a final table, and you start thinking about deals, what it does is it encourages collusion and it encourages cheating. If there's two players at the final table, let's say, for example, two players at the final table have 50% of each other in a tournament. The chances of them knocking each other out go down quite a bit. And it doesn't even matter if they're trying to soft play each other. It doesn't even matter if they're trying to collude. What's going to happen is there's going to be something in your subconscious that just is going to be aware that by knocking this player out, you're hurting your own interest. That's bad for the game. It encourages it encourages collusion. It encourages cheating at these tournaments. It also makes the players who aren't privy to those kind of deals feel like they got fleeced somehow. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this in smaller tournaments where the final table will be going on. It'll go from 6 players to 5 players to 4 players. All of a sudden, as soon as they lose the 5th guy, the 4 players instantly make a deal, and the guy who came in 5th is kind of looking around, wondering what just happened. I got knocked out. Now these 4 players are making a deal, and it's like, they're addressing each other by first names. They're laughing and they're jovial, and they're like, oh, pleasure doing business with you again, Dan. Yep, I'll see you later. I'll see you later, Mark. Let's try to chop it up again tomorrow. All of a sudden, it feels like the players who were not privy to that deal got fleeced by the players who were. It definitely makes you feel like you were on the outside of some shady business going on, and it's very deflating to poker players. And it happens more than you think. When you look at a straight up heads up deal like Mike and Ryan made at this Fallsview WPT, things like this usually in poker. Oh, by the way, thanks Gatorbait for that sub. Really appreciate it. Things like that, usually happen, much, in a much more subtle way. Mike is kind of right later, in his statement here, where he says that he doesn't think that, making it apparent that the deal happened, is somehow worse or more immoral or unethical than hiding the deal. And I agree with that, but I'll go into that here in a second. The main point that I'm trying to make is that deals in tournaments are bad for the game, are bad for poker, especially in situations like the WPT or the WSOP, where we're trying to make a televised product. We're trying to make poker something more than it is right now, which is, let's just be real, it's just a bunch of hustlers taking advantage of fish and tossing their money back and forth. In poker, we're not doing charity work. This is a hugely negative sum game and a negative sum environment that brings out the worst in people. Over and over, we've seen champions from the past admit to straight up cheating. We've seen World Series of Poker champions like Russ Hamilton come out with hole carding scandals that just completely takes away credibility from all of his previous wins. We've seen, some of the early, road gamblers say, yeah, cheating was just part of the game back then, but it's really cleaned up. And then we have stuff like this, and this isn't really cheating, but it is unethical. It is unethical, and I want to start breaking it down point by point. But the first thing that I hope that you'll agree with is that deal making at a final table is bad for the game itself. And while it might be good for the players who are making the deal, it's bad for the image of the game, and it's bad for it's bad for the way we track the game. When you start looking at when you start looking at Mike Leah's Hinden Mob, and here he is, on Hinden Mob listed as what was his Hinden Mob? What was his Hinden Mob here? He's listed now as the 44th top poker player in the world. Those POI points and the GPI points haven't even come up yet, so he's going to move up even further. When you start ranking poker players based on results that might actually not be real results, you have to start kind of scratching your head and wondering, that this actually is unfair. Who does it hurt? Well, it hurts the guy in 45th, Mike. That's who it hurts. It hurts the guy who is trying to play the game right. Here's Daryl Fish, and Kenny Halyard, who are right on your heels. And now because of this chop, you're going to get first place points for GPI points, and that's going to put you up in the Global Poker Index ranking. Probably, I don't exactly know how many points he's going to get there, but he's probably going to get enough to get, to break the top 30. That's going to break, that's if he all of a sudden is ranked higher than, Benjamin Zamani because of this fake heads-up deal. Well, who does it hurt? It hurts him. It hurts Benjamin Zamani, because guess what happens? What happens is these, if we ever get to the point where, Nike or Under Armour starts coming into poker saying, who are we going to sponsor? What are they going to do? They're going to put their sponsorship money based on these results. They're going to look at the rankings, and they're going to say, well, we want the #1 poker player in the world to wear the Nike swoop. This already happens in poker. We already look at these, at tournament results, and not cash results, tournament results, when online poker sites are deciding who to sponsor and who to give their marketing money to. No one cares who is winning the big game at Bobby's when it comes to who we're going to patch up. They care about who have won bracelets, who have won WPTs, who have taken down these high rollers. And when these deals start making a mockery of that, and actually making everybody question the validity of the results to begin with. So who does it hurt? It hurts the people who you're getting a leg up on all these rankings. Who also does it hurt? It hurts, it hurts everybody who's trying to make poker into something that it's not right now. Everybody who's trying to make poker into this positive sum game. How are we going to get outside sponsorship money when stuff like this happens? This is a rules break. You did break the rules, Mike. And as much as as much as I agree with what you're saying, that you've put in the work, you've shown over and over that you're a world-class poker player. Yes, you deserve to be in the top 100 of the GPI. Yes. But you did break the rules, and if it's right there in the WPT rules and it says we don't facilitate deals, deals are not allowed. And if you go into the back room somewhere, if you go into the bathroom and make a deal with somebody, then you're breaking the rules of the tournament. Now, I'm not saying that what the WPT should do here is to disqualify you guys and take the money back. I'm not saying that. But there should be some sort of repercussion here. Now, Mike is absolutely right in his statement that this happens way more often than zero. There's been a lot of people who have come out since this scandal. I'm going to call it a scandal. A lot of people have come out since this scandal saying, look, I made a deal for when I won the WPT, and I won. Lance Bradley, who was the former chief editor of Bluff magazine, he made an interesting tweet and said, what if I were to tell you that the winner of this very same event last year also made a deal when it got heads up, and he is at this moment nominated for an American Poker Awards. Well, Mike is right. Mike is right when he goes down into this this statement, and he says, where is the quote? Well, let's just start breaking down the statement paragraph by paragraph, because Mike is right that this happens more often than we would like to see. But that doesn't mean that, just because it happens, all the time, that this is all right. It's not acceptable. You guys broke the WPT rules. You guys, you guys made a deal at a WPT final table. How are they going to actually put that on TV now? How is that going to look when people are watching and the commentators are sitting there? Well, I guess there must have been a deal made in the bathroom. We'll never really know what happened. That's not what we're trying to do. And if it's in the rules, if it says there, on the WPT official rules that you can't make a deal, then that's what you have to live by. You can't make a deal. What should the WPT do about it? We'll get to that, okay? We'll get to that. But let's start breaking down the statement. Well, it's been an interesting day, to say the least. Can't say I've ever experienced anything like this before. I have no issue whatsoever with people debating POY, TOC, deal-making ethics, WPT rules, and whatever else they so choose. Listen, Mike, here's just some advice for you, okay? Whenever you're faced with public criticism, and I've dealt with my fair share, it's a mistake to come up with a response and just put it out in the world. Right now, you're feeling like a victim. You're feeling like a victim. And that's coming across quite a bit in your statement here. But you're not a victim. You just won a really big tournament that a lot of people dream about winning. That they literally have a dream about sitting at that table and winning that championship. Well, you won it. And it turns out that maybe you didn't. And the fact that you made this heads-up deal and broke the WPT rules and made kind of a mockery of this crowning achievement in poker actually does make victims out of other people. You're not the victim here. And I know it feels like you're the victim because you're getting a lot of flack. You're getting a lot of criticism from the poker community. But you got to suck that up. And when you're issuing a statement, don't just write it out and send it out to the world. Write it out, sleep on it, give it to a few trusted friends to take the red pen out and say, don't say that, don't say that. And above all, don't try to paint yourself as the victim here. This is honest advice for somebody who's in a position like this. I feel like I've made those same mistakes. I feel like a lot of in my own past, I've done exactly what you're doing here. Wrote a statement, sent it out to the world, say, look, I'm not the bad guy. I think that's a mistake. I don't think that this, like right from the very beginning, you're making some mistakes here. Like this one, I have no issue whatsoever with people debating Player of the Year, TOC, deal-making ethics, WPT rules, and whatever else they so choose. Like what? This is a sentence that would get the cut, right? And no, don't say that, because it right off the bat starts making people kind of not like the statement. It's like, oh, I'm very happy, Mike, that you think it's okay for us to debate this. You didn't really need to say that. Well, it's been an interesting day to say the least. Can't say I've ever experienced anything like this before. You don't need to say that. The one thing that stings me is the words buy a trophy or title or something to that effect. I have never or will ever pay for a win, but I'll get into more detail about that later. That's what stings you here? That people are saying that you bought the trophy. Okay. Not sure why I feel the need to defend myself, but I feel my integrity is being attacked, which doesn't feel very good. Well, that's why you feel the need to defend yourself, because your integrity is being attacked. And no, that doesn't feel very good. I'm extremely sleep deprived, and it's been about 10 years since I've had to form paragraphs, so excuse my ramblings and grammatical errors. Again, You just won what, three? You just won $1/3 of $1 million. Pay for an editor. Pay for somebody who can actually help you with this PR mess. Because anytime you try to fix your own PR mess, you end up digging yourself deeper. I'm not saying you personally, Mike. I'm saying that's just how it is. This is why there is a whole industry called public relations, which you know, they're not going to take that much to help you present yourself in a positive light. Okay. I'm going to focus mainly on my heads-up deal at Fallsview WPT main event, as that's what has obviously brought these issues into attack or discussion. Look, just say into discussion. You don't need to be like, I'm being attacked again. You're painting yourself as a victim. You're not the fucking victim. Okay, you're the one who actually did something that affects the game, affects all of us, and you know, you gotta, when you're making a statement like this, you gotta paint yourself as the responsible party, not the victim. I will post a follow-up going back on my previous wins, chops, non-chops. Not only does it seem many are curious, I too would like to review to see how I've made out of it, whatever. So then he goes through a quick background. He talks about how he was backed. So in the first 6 or 7 years, he was backed, so he didn't actually get to make decisions about whether to make deals. I can tell you that from my own experience being backed, and I'm pretty sure that Mike and I were actually backed by the same people. From my own experience, I've never had a backer try to force me into making a deal, ever. I've never heard of that happening. For the most part, when you're playing on somebody else's money in a tournament, you do have to clear backing. You do have to clear chops that you would be doing, but you don't have to accept chops. You know, you're never going to have a situation where a backer says to you, "You're playing on my money. You're going to make this deal." That just doesn't happen. And for the most part, when it comes to staking deals, staking tends to lower the chances that a deal will actually even happen. I've been playing exclusively on my own for about 3.5 years with no backing whatsoever since my $1 million score in 2014. Humble brag. I did not chop heads up with Dan Coleman, even though we were playing for about 400,000. This is when he took second to Dan Coleman, 2014. I don't know exactly which one he's talking about. We can go to the Hendon Mob. It doesn't matter. But he's pointing out. Well, I guess it does matter, you know, because here he is. He's pointing out. He's actually kind of calling. He's actually kind of calling Dan out as suggesting that maybe he would be willing to chop this second. Let's look at the prize. We'll just look through his. It's this one right here, the Seminole Hard Rock Poker Open SHRPO main event, which I believe is. I think that this is a WPT event. I can't remember, and I'm not sure whether there's a rule against deal making here. It's kind of interesting that Mike brings that up because you know, I feel like this is just a way of him also kind of mitigating what happened by saying, look, this happens all the time. And that in that tournament, Dan Coleman hinted that he would be willing to make a deal as long as it was a little bit more favorable to him than I see him. So this is kind of a mitigating statement, right? This is him kind of sticking with this refrain: deals happen all the time, deals happen all the time, deals happen all the time, which is true. Deals do happen all the time. I almost never sell action with the odd exception of the 50K PPC at WSOP, and just about never swap any percentages. I like to play for as much as possible. With that said, how do I feel about chopping? I don't like it. We're on the same page there. Being deep in a tournament, making the final table, playing shorthanded with huge money on the line, playing heads up for a title, there's no feeling I can compare to it. Nothing I love more. And I don't know. I could think of some things that I personally love more, but you know, I think that I like that. I like the statement. You know, there you are, Mike, saying that when it comes to chopping, you're generally opposed to it. And you're only going to be chopping in certain circumstances where the deal is just too good to turn down. So he says, I've turned down more chops than most people, that I am sure. So why did I decide to chop this tournament, and how did we go about it? So now he's going to start talking about why he decided to chop here. And he goes through, he starts talking about how he wanted to win this tournament more than any he can remember. All right. You know, I feel like for me personally, if I'm going to save my one time, I'm going to probably pick the main event at the WSOP rather than just a standard WPT tournament. But all right, you want to win this more than anything else, and it's probably selective memory, a little bit of survivorship bias or what have you. He's like, he doesn't happen all the time. He says like from 3 tables to 2 tables, he was just so focused. He knew he was going to win. Again, I feel like this is just kind of remembering it that way. Survivorship bias is a cognitive bias. But it doesn't really matter. It has no bearing on the story, except I feel like this is also kind of mitigating, because what he's basically saying is that he was going to win it anyway. This is basically like that's kind of what that's leading up to, right? This isn't normal for me. I was messaging a friend early day 2 to come back and watch the final table. I was focused on nothing else, and I just knew I was going to win. He doesn't actually say that, but I feel like that's the implication. The implication is that this is his, that this tournament is different, and somehow he knew he was going to win. And that's mitigating, right? That kind of mitigates the injury. If he would have won it anyway, then what's the problem? So I think that this is kind of self-serving language and kind of mitigates the issue. After many ups and downs, I found myself heads up with Ryan. He talks about how we're Facebook friends, friendly with each other. They have a little bit of a history, but not so much of a history that these guys really have a shared economic interest. A lot of times you find that. A lot of times you find people at the final table who actually have a very strong shared financial interest, a very strong shared economic interest that you just can't deny. And when that happens, it's pretty problematic. I don't really know what the rules should be, but you see it all the time. There's some power couples in poker who end up making final tables together, going deep in tournaments together. There's husband and wife. There's fathers and sons. There's brothers, who end up going really deep. And for me personally, I feel like anytime those very obvious economic, shared economic scenarios play themselves out in tournaments, that I think it should probably be part of the TDA and part of the actual rules that that immediate family members are actually separated from the tables whenever possible. I think that is important. I would actually, it's been happening enough over the last few years that I would actually, if I was a part of the TDA, I would try to make that a rule, because it looks bad. But once you're at the final table, what are you even going to do? At that point, you can't separate them. If Mike and Ryan actually were brothers or lovers or whatever it might be, then by the time they're at the final table, you can't really do anything, But he makes it clear that they're friendly with each other, but they don't actually know each other that well, where it would be like presumed that they would be doing a deal where they would be sharing the win afterwards. It doesn't need to be said. I guess so. I don't know. I don't see how it would be better or worse if they were really, really good friends as opposed to complete strangers. But he says he respected his game. He generally likes him. He didn't know him well personally. As soon as we were heads up, he mentioned something about talking a deal. They're playing for a lot of money. They're playing for what? $150,000 is the difference between first and second place here. Let's see. If we go back to the actual amount of money at stake, 358,000 US versus 239,000 US. So, 120,000 US, 150,000 Canadian. That's a lot of money. And if you're in Mike's spot, or if you're in Ryan's spot, there's a lot of variance. There's a lot of luck in heads up. Every poker player knows that. So, as soon as we were heads up, he mentioned something about talking about a deal. Can't remember his exact words. I hadn't considered making a deal until that exact moment. I believe my words were something like, well, I wouldn't consider any deal unless I got the win, the trophy, etc. So Ryan being the kind of player who is worried about money before glory, is like, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I don't care about the win. I don't care about the trophy. I don't care about GPI points. Take it. It's yours. We'll just do an ICM deal, and we'll walk away, and I'll have won more money than you, but you can take the title. Most tournaments that I've seen that actually do facilitate deals, and I don't think any of them should, but most of them that do facilitate deals won't actually let somebody take the trophy, take the win, if they have a chip disadvantage. If they're actually in second place or third place in the chip counts, and the players do a deal, they don't allow them all to get together and say, okay, well, we'll say that second place won, or we'll say that third place won. Most of the places that facilitate deals like that won't allow that to happen. But here we've got the WPT venue, which doesn't facilitate deals at all. Has it in the rules that you can't do them. But Ryan is like, yeah, I don't really care. Let's go ahead and let's do the deal. You can have the win. If here Mike says, I didn't know how Ryan would respond and honestly didn't care. I would have been happy to play for it. Okay. The fact that you would have been happy to play for it if he wasn't going to give you the win, I don't really think matters at all. Heads up for a WPT title, not much, WPT title, not much more exciting than that. But very quickly he responded that he'd be fine with with that if we did even ICM. Okay. Now, what's interesting is Mike is kind of making the point here that even ICM deals benefit the short stacks over the big stacks. I think that's generally true. But I'm not so sure how true it is when you're in a heads-up situation. Generally ICM benefits the short stacks because there actually is survival equity for short stacks that they get kind of inflated a little bit. Okay, but when you're heads up, I'm not so sure how the calculators actually divide that up, because I think that when it comes to ICM, if you're heads up and you've got a 2-to-1 advantage, then you're a 2-to-1 favorite to win the tournament. I think that's how the ICM calculators are going to play that out. Now, in real life, is that the case? I'm going to suggest no. I actually think that in real life, when you're heads up with a chip advantage of 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, then your chances of winning the tournament are actually more than 2-to-1 or 3-to-1. Because in order to get to that point where you have that big of an advantage, you probably do have a play advantage. You probably do have some sort of a positive edge there. So yeah, but the point is this: I think that Mike is probably right that an ICM deal is probably to his benefit if you're looking at how much the stacks are worth. But I don't think it really matters. Okay, he says, okay, we're going to do an even ICM deal. Sure, I may be giving up some edge, but it's not like I play heads-up poker every day, week, or even month. You may be giving up some edge. I think that you probably are giving up a little bit of an edge, Mike. I actually do. I've never heard of Ryan. I'm not saying that he's not an incredible player. He had to get through a huge field of tough pros, so he's doing something right, and maybe he's a heads-up wizard. But my guess is that you did have a little bit of an edge. Taking the ICM deal, though, sure, whatever. He says, wow, I actually get to be responsible and not just flip for $150,000, and I get a WPT title, a spot in the Champions Club, entry into the TOC, and my 4th Fallsview title in 5 years. How could I not agree to this? So, well, Mike, you could not agree to it by just simply saying no. It's actually against the WPT rules. Ryan and I went off the stage to discuss. I did not pause the clock, but we didn't mind as it seemed very likely we would come to an easy agreement of terms. We worked out all the exact details and breakdown. We added the 15K seat to first for the ICM breakdown. Worked out how much I would have to give him, as I would have to sign for, get paid for first, and then give him the difference. We even agreed how much we were going to tip to the dealers and staff. We triple-checked stacks, payouts, and everything, as they said we were going to have to play it out. Ryan and I figured the easiest, quickest way to get it over was just for him to raise full large portions of his stack. We did this in an extremely obvious way, making a lot of jokes and having fun. We were both extremely happy with the outcome. Now, looking back, I see how it's embarrassing and disappointing for the WPT, reporting staff, and even poker players, fans having ridiculous hand histories like that being posted on the website, live updates, and deciding the tournament that way. There has to be a better way to go about it. We were not trying to disrespect any parties involved, but we were celebrating our wins and made a decision in our own best interests. We've both earned almost $1 million at Fallsview over the last few years. It's incredible, really. So, a lot of humble brags there, you know. I'm going to have to agree with what you're saying here, though, as far as this. He says, one comment I read a few times is, quote, they shouldn't have made it so obvious, end quote. In my mind, that would be 1,000% times worse. If we schemed up a way for him to dump chips to me without anyone knowing, that would feel like cheating and collusion and would be embarrassing for Ryan. I mean, I don't know that it would be embarrassing for Ryan, okay? But I do think that being upfront with your deal is the right thing to do. I actually think that you are doing the right thing here, Mike, by acknowledging that a deal was made, that you didn't try to hide that fact from anybody, that whether it was against the rules or not, you did what was in your own best interest, you did make a deal, and you made it very clear to anybody watching that the deal was happening. So I actually agree with you that, you know, if you're going to make the deal, trying to do it in a way that no one ever finds out is kind of worse. You know, is much worse. 1,000% times worse. Well, that's not really a thing. So there have been countless suggestions on how this can be improved in the future, and I'm quite confident that from this there will be more discussion amongst the tours and hopefully improvement in the entire system. I do agree that every major title should be played for, and if that was the case, then we would have played. People suggesting, why didn't we chop and leave something to play for, or chop and play for the trophy TOC? Those would not have been my terms. Chop fairly and give me the win, or we play. And I actually understand where Mike's coming from here, because if you take away the pressure of the money, then players, you know, are going to play differently. You know, he might feel like he had a better edge when the money was at stake as well, where he wouldn't have done a deal without the trophy and the win. I don't think, you know, when he says, I do agree that every major title should be played for, and if that was the case, then we would have played. But I mean, that was kind of the case. You know, and you didn't play for the title. In fact, the way that you know, when you made the deal, you were in second place, so you really shouldn't have gotten the title at all. It should have just been, okay, we made a deal, the tournament's over, we're walking away, Ryan wins, and you come in second. That's how that deal should have gone. You know, but it shouldn't have even gone to begin with. You know, you guys should not have done a deal. The fact that my opponent chooses to give me the win to lock up their equity is their choice. That's true that it's Ryan's choice, but it's also your choice. You know, again, you're kind of making yourself, you know, the passive victim here. My reputation, my play at the table, my intimidation, my likability, whatever else that goes into their decision to give me more money or to give me the trophy, that's something that I have earned over time. Ryan also had his own motivations, some of which he has shared on Twitter. I won't speak for him, but he seemed more than content and knowledgeable regarding the TOC, and that he had put some thought into making a deal. One thing I want to make clear is that I don't think anybody is saying that somehow Ryan, the guy who made the deal when he was chip leader, is somehow a victim here. No one's saying that. No one's suggesting that. No one's saying that, you know, you got over on Ryan and that's why what you did was wrong. You know, WPT Player of the Year. What should be done in deals? Splits points amongst the chopping players, whether even or by ICM. I don't think that's what should be done in deals. He says, sure, this makes sense, but WPT doesn't facilitate deals, so they can't chop Player of the Year points either. Should I get somewhere between first and second Player of the Year points? Yes, but what about all the other deals that have happened already this year, past years, and will continue to happen going forward? Penalize me because we didn't try as hard to hide it. Either way, Ryan and I receive the same total amount of points, and it's not like either of us are in the running for Player of the Year. I have one previous small cash this session, maybe even had more. I'm not really sure, but other than a continuing player trying to buy points late in the season, this is probably the least important part of the debate. I mean, I don't know. I don't think that this is the least important part of the debate. What should be done in deals? What should how should the WPT handle something like this? I think that that's an important part of the debate. And whether you're in the running for WPT Player of the Year or not doesn't really matter. You know, you're kind of right about that. But that doesn't mean that, that doesn't mean that this point is just like not worth talking about. As far as the Tournament of Champions, he tries to say that this is no big deal because it's not like they're sneaking an extra player in, right? And it's not like the people who are in the Tournament of Champions. What he's saying is they didn't lose anything. He didn't do anything wrong to the people who are actually in the Tournament of Champions. The WPT, you guys, probably know about this already. Every year, every season, they give every winner of each stop a seat into the WPT Tournament of Champions. And then anybody who has ever won a WPT can also buy into that Tournament of Champions. And the Tournament of Champions is kind of a sweet deal because usually it's like rake free, and they add money and they add prizes. I think last year they added a car. So you win. It has a high level of prestige. It has a very low rake, and it actually has money added onto it. So being able to play that is a pretty good deal, especially for somebody like Mike, who is a lifer grinder. And when he says that it's not like they snuck an extra player in, and it's not like they did something to game the system. Here's what I would say to that. This is what I would respond to. If I was in the if I was in the Tournament of Champions this year, I would feel like my equity went down having to play you as opposed to Ryan. You are in the top 50 of the GPI before this even happened. You are the player who is going to buy in every year from now because you can. So I don't. I actually think that the value of that tournament does go down for players who are in it because of this deal. He says, did I earn my way into the club? Is the TOC diminished because we made a deal with 2 players left that decided who gets in? I think this has been overblown. You didn't earn your way into the club. And yeah, you're right. There's a lot of other people in that club. Here you say, who knows how many winners this season and past seasons have made a deal to decide who wins. More than me, that is 100% for sure. And you're absolutely right. This kind of thing happens all the time. All the time. It happens so much that you didn't even think that there was a problem. You didn't even think there was anything wrong with it, that you were actually willing to do the deal and make it painfully obvious to everybody what just happened. That's how common it is. And that's kind of the problem. And you're right that there's a lot of people in that TOC club that is that has made a deal to get there. But that doesn't really take anything away from what you did. And this is just another example of trying to mitigate the issue and say, oh well, everybody does it, so when I do it, it's not a big deal. Maybe it is a big deal, and maybe it's a big deal when they do it, and it's a big deal when you do it. So I feel like that probably would get the red line too. Probably not the right way to make the argument and paint yourself as the good guy here. It's not like I'm a billionaire who bought his way into an exclusive club. I had to fight my way through a field of 517 players, the final 2, and earned enough respect from my opponent for them to make a deal that gives me the win and everything that goes with it without me giving any extra money. Yeah, I'm not so sure that, I don't even know what to say to that. I mean, he's taking shots at a couple of the people who continue to play high rollers and end up in the top of the GPI, even though they're buried overall. That's fine. He's saying that the reason that he was able to win, to get the win as part of the deal was because he had garnered so much respect over his career. From an outsider looking in, I think the reason that you were able to get that win, Mike, was because it meant more to you than it meant to Ryan. And that's the only reason. It wasn't because Ryan had some great respect or fear for you. It's because he didn't care about the win. He didn't care about the trophy. He doesn't care about GPI points. He doesn't care about going down to Florida and playing against the best in the world as part of a spectacle for television. He cares about the money. And to him, that was where it started, and that's where it ended. I know a lot of players like Ryan. If they could turn off the cameras, they would. If they could go back to the point where we didn't have hole cards, where we didn't have this idea of trying to make poker a sport and being on TV, they would. I'm not one of those guys, neither are you, because I think we both see the future of the game as being something that poker could be more than it is right now. It could be more than what it was. So let's get real. The reason that you were able to get the win didn't have as much to do with his fear and respect of you. It had everything to do with him not caring about it as much as you do. So, yeah, he says, I would feel somewhat different if someone was to actually buy the win. If I had offered an extra $2,000 or $10,000 or $50,000 or $100,000, where the line is, I'm not so sure. Is it negotiating? Is it buying? But that scenario will never involve me. I have too much pride. I don't really think that there's any distinction here between buying the win and making a deal for the win. It comes down to the same thing. It comes down to the exact same thing. I don't think that that you're any more or less unethical by taking $2,000 and giving it to Ryan, or $10,000 or $100,000 or the whole thing. I think it comes down to the exact same thing. He goes on to talk about all of his online titles and all of his successes. All of them won without a deal. Some other wins were chopped. He doesn't talk about which wins were chopped. He talks about some of his losses were also chopped. He doesn't talk about that. But I would say you don't need to talk about any of those. We're talking about this. If you want to pretend my results over the years are tarnished because I made a deal, heads up, okay, you're free to have opinion. It's not my opinion. I don't think anybody has that opinion of your results over the years. They have an opinion about this result. And it's not so much you, Mike. I think that's one thing that I'm getting from this statement is I know that you feel attacked and you feel like your peers are going against you. But what you're saying about this happening all the time is true. And besides just deal making, there's also so many swaps. And so much going on behind the scenes that the public doesn't know, that the players don't even know. So it's gotten to the point where you don't even really feel like what you did was wrong, and you feel like everybody attacking you for making the deal at the WPT final table and making that obvious chip dump where you get to be the WPT winner in the winner's photo, and Ryan gets to be the runner-up. That was just fine. But it's not fine. And I think he says, I've had numerous requests to do a podcast or interview to discuss the situation, so we'll likely follow up with that in the coming days if anyone still cares. I hope that you do, Mike. I would be interested to hear more about your point of view. I can sympathize with you a little bit because I do feel like you are taking a lot of this personally. And you do feel like you are being attacked when you just did what a lot of other people do all the time, and it completely takes away the wind from your sails in this, in this celebration. This should be a time when you're celebrating a big win and a big, a career highlight. Instead, now there's going to be a little asterisk next to it. But I'm glad that this has happened, and I'm glad that you're the one to actually bring it up. I feel like when you are sitting down at the table and you're saying, look, I just did what was in my own best interest. We made a deal. We're not trying to hide that. A lot of other people try to hide it. We're not trying to hide it. I think that your approach is I feel like that's the right thing. I I don't think that you should have made a deal, but if you're going to make a deal, you shouldn't be trying to hide it in the bathroom. You should be you should be presenting it as it, as it is what it is. Now what? And I would like to actually address the now what, because I think that the WPT actually should do something about this. I think that they should they should do something to change this kind of behavior in the future. I don't think what they should do is make it easier for gaming commissions and venues and players to make deals. I don't think that they should facilitate deals. I think what they should do is have a very strict policy that they're going to enforce, that no deals are allowed, and if deals happen, that something happens to the players who do it. I don't think that they should be taking your money away, but I do think that they should. I do think that they should take the title away. I also think that they should suspend you for the rest of the WPT season, you and Ryan both. And anybody who comes up with, well, I did it too, pound me too, well, do the same thing to them then, or just take an approach that from here on out, this is how we're going to handle it. I do think there should be repercussions, and I think that even though I like you, Mike, and I respect you, and I respect your game, and I don't want to see bad things happen to you, I do think that it's important that an example be made here. So I think that they should strip the win. I think they should take you out of the Tournament of Champions tournament, and I think that they should suspend you for the rest of the season. And then I think that you should come to the WSOP and kick some ass. Because the only way that you can get over controversy like this is to just go ahead and keep on winning and winning and winning and do what you do. So that's my reaction to it. What do you guys think? Looks like we got a lot of people in here saying stuff. He says, "Yeah, I don't even know where to start." Now, as he says, wonder how the guy in third place feels. Probably pretty crappy. Ghost of Him says, disagree that deal making is always bad for the game. Respect your opinion, but I think that is way too black and white. All right. Shog says, you can say that about selling action then too. You can definitely say it about swapping action. And one thing that I actually, when I rewind and think back to the Epic Poker League, one thing that I really liked about that Epic Poker League was when we got to the final table, Annie Duke had us all come into a room. She looked at us all straight in the eye, and she said, I want to be very clear. There are not to be any deals, and there are not to be any swaps. If any of you guys have any percentage of any other player in this room, you have to say it right now, because if it comes out, you will be suspended from the league. And if it comes out that deals were made, you will be suspended from the league permanently. I was like, okay, wow. Selling action definitely creates, creates overlapping economic incentive. So does, but more so swapping action. Every once in a while, though, you'll see a situation where two players are at a final table, or two players are at the same table, where one of the players is backing the other player in the event, and I feel like that is problematic. I do feel like those kind of equity swaps and shared economic ties should be disclosed, and I also think that's one of the reasons why poker needs systems like U-Stake and those kind of public staking systems in place to actually make that more transparent to the public, to the other players, and for the good of the game. So I actually agree with you there, Eshog. But I do think that even though there is some overlap, it's not quite the same as making a deal. Ghost of Him, talking more. He says, when there's collusion with 18 people left, that's a big deal in my humble opinion, and I agree with you. When players are heads up and they make a deal, I may not like that, but it's their money as far as I'm concerned. All right. I can see it from your point of view. I would say that if one thing that I would point out is if you're in a situation where if you get heads up with one player, you're going to be able to make a deal. But if you get heads up with another player, you're not going to be able to make a deal. And you are inclined to want to make a deal, then that that is a problem. That creates a situation where you're going to be promoting implicit collusion. Even if it's not explicit, even if there's no agreement, even if it's not even on a conscious level, you're just going to be going for the guy who will block your deal. It happens all the time. Big Slick says, it's hard to believe Nike or UA would sponsor poker with the description you just gave about the game. Fair point. Fair point. I actually think that a lot of the game has, a lot of things in poker have to change for it to be appealing to sponsors. Poker Player says those days of big deals are over. We'll see, Poker Player. I think poker could become something pretty amazing. Ghost of Him says poker has bigger problems than this. We should have rules that are enforceable, not these kinds of rules designed to create an illusion about multi-table tournament wins to draw more fish in the game. Poker has bigger problems than this. Okay, I'll agree with that as well, Ghost of Him, but I don't think that really takes away from the fact that this is a problem. We're going to keep on going down here. Nilesy. always that joker. And Arbor Gold says, by using the title as the bargaining chip to make the deal, he is buying the title. I mean, I'm kind of with you on that, Arbor Gold. I think that actually by using the title as part of the bargaining chip, as part of the way to structure the deal, then that is kind of buying the title. The Thin Blue Line says they should change the title of Mike Leah wins first place, so Mike Leah gets first place. Ghost of Him says implicit collusion is a very horrible part of poker, and you are right, but we are never getting rid of it. I agree that we're never going to be able to get rid of implicit collusion, but we can do things to mitigate it. And one of the things that we can do to mitigate it is to take very hard stances against deals at the final table. And that's just one of the reasons why deals are bad for poker. There are other reasons why deals are bad for poker as well. Especially when it comes to televised events, especially when it comes to an event that is going to live on past us. I've been in situations where I've done HBT viewing parties, and I've been, sitting there trying to do commentary and make sense of what happened, tell the story of what happened at a certain tournament. And you get to a certain point where all of a sudden the players completely change gears. They completely play like they don't care anymore, and you realize, oh, they just made a deal. It makes it very hard, as a commentator, trying to learn from the game, trying to learn from the tournament, trying to use that tournament in a way to spin poker in a positive light. It makes it very difficult, and that's just one of the reasons why tournaments like the WPT have a rule against it. Why they won't facilitate it. That's one of the reasons why WSOP won't facilitate deals. There was, a lot of you are probably too young to the game to remember, but this has happened before, where players have bought titles. Back in the 90s, there was a couple. I believe it was Max Stern and his wife. They were playing a lot of WSOP events. I believe that was the name of the player. And they wanted to have the record of being the first husband and wife team to have won a World Series of Poker bracelet. So when they got to, they were in a situation, I can't remember whether it was the husband or the wife that was at the final table. One of them had already won a bracelet. And the other one was at the final table, and they offered the rest of them money to take a dive. And everyone did. They were like, okay, yeah, sure. Who cares about these bracelets? These mean nothing. This is when they didn't really mean a lot, when they were playing against like 20 or 30 people. It was either in the 80s or the 90s. And that came out, and I can't remember what, if anything, Binions actually did about it, but it did put that asterisk right next to their name, and it took away the credibility of their bracelet. And if their bracelet is devalued, then every other bracelet is devalued. That's really how it goes. And the WSOP has a pretty strict rule against deal making at final tables for bracelet events. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm sure it happens, but it shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen. Whiskey Coyote says, I would say eliminating the short stack by checking down is more just strategic rather than collusion. Whiskey Coyote, implicit collusion can be correct on the strategic level. I actually wrote a whole article about this when it comes to something that Amir Vahidi called the jungle rule. I wrote it in All In magazine. The idea being that there's a very fine line between implicit collusion and an explicit collusion. Explicit collusion being when you're sitting down at a table with another pro and you make an agreement to soft play each other. Implicit collusion can involve soft playing other people that you think are at a high skill level, and that can be actually just good tournament strategy. But the difference is actually making that explicit deal, and that's where you cross the line between good strategic play and cheating. But I agree with you that implicit collusion often is the positive thing to do, the correct strategy decision. Yeah. So guys, that's pretty much my take on it. I think I'll probably take some part of those little statements and try to pop it up on YouTube. I'm also going to look at the actual WPT rules and see, just to verify that it does say in the rules that you can't make a deal. I'm going to be, it's going to be interesting to see how this turns out. It's interesting to look at it and say, well, who are the victims? Who is worse off here than if a deal had never been made? That's an interesting question, and I think that, just to say, oh, the guy in third or the guy in fourth is the victim, I don't really think that's the case, because I don't think that Mike or Ryan had any inkling that they would be able to do a deal before they got heads up. So the victim is actually a little bit more abstract. The victims in this case are, future players and all of us, which is kind of silly to say, but that's basically what I think is that basically is who the victim is. I do think something should be done. I think that the WPT is kind of pushed into a corner where they're going to have to actually take a stance here, and I don't think that it's going to end up well for Mike. I actually think that the stance is going to be, kind of more akin to like the 1919 White Sox, where players were actually made an example of whether they played their hardest or not. And I fear that Mike Leah is going to kind of end up like Shoeless Joe Jackson here, because he's right. It's something that is happening everywhere. So many people in the Champions Club, both in the WSOP or the WPT, what have you, have made deals and have tried to hide those deals. But I think that deal making is something that needs to stop in tournament poker, and it's never going to stop unless the WPT actually does something. So I think that at this point, Adam Pliska and all those guys over at the WPT have probably been painted into a corner where they're going to have to take a very stern approach to this, and I just hope that they. I hope that they don't do anything that's going to really ruin the career of any poker players, because the WPT is a pretty important stop. But you know what? There's tournaments other than that. I think that eventually, as a game, we'll probably get to the point where we actually have a players' union and a formal regulatory body, kind of like the Major League Baseball Association. I think that we could see like the Major League Poker Association, where we could actually see people get banned from poker, and that's probably how the game will have to eventually go if it's ever going to grow to the kind of game that actually turns into a positive sum environment, actually gets the outside sponsorship, actually gets to be a point where it's more of a social positive rather than the illusion of social positivity. So I think that if I was at the WPT, I don't think that I would. I hope that the WPT doesn't go so far as to straight up ban for life anybody involved here, but I do think that they need to do something. And at minimum, I think that they need to just go ahead and take him out of that TOC and strip the title. I don't know that they should give it to Ryan either. I think that they should probably just have nobody crown the winner in this event. And I also think that, probably a suspension for the rest of the WPT season is probably warranted here for both of those players, both Mike and Ryan. Above that, I think that anything more than that would be overkill. Okay, guys, really appreciate all of you hanging out and listening to my opinion on this. Again, it's my opinion. I don't. I could be wrong. I see it from the other point of view as well. I can see it from people who say, look, it's their money. They get to do what they want. But when you're signing up for a tournament, you got to play by the rules. And when you're signing up for a televised tournament, you know what the deal is. You can't go play the WSOP main event and then say, well, I'm not going to show my whole cards. You have to. You can't go sign up for a WSOP main event with logos everywhere looking like a NASCAR driver and saying, hey, I get to wear what I want. It's my money. There's a rule right there that says that you have logo requirements. There's certain things that we have to do as professional poker players to make it seem like a profession rather than just a hustle. And so I think that while I can empathize a bit with Mike's stance here, and I definitely, hats off to you, Mike, for not trying to, hide the fact that you made a deal. I do think that it was wrong to have made a deal, and I think that you should acknowledge that, take responsibility for it, and let the chips fall where they may. And hopefully the game will be stronger because of you and because of this. So thanks for watching, you guys. I'm going to go ahead and shut the stream down and do some video editing. We'll see you later.